So in this lecture video, this will be the first of probably 3 lecture videos on the reproductive system, specific for the general A&P course at this college. The first thing we're going to be talking about in this case is we're going to be talking about how do humans become male or female. Interestingly speaking, in the uterus, okay, so this is your 5 to 6 weeks embryo, okay, just barely developed. Most of us are actually sexually indifferent, which means to say that we are neither male or female yet at that point. And if you notice, there's actually 2 ducts, the Wolffian duct, which is brown in color, and the Mullerian duct, which is actually a pink in color, which is somewhat appropriate, okay? So males, I don't know if you know this, I hope you all know this, actually have the X or the Y chromosome. Okay, not the X chromosome. Females are XX and males are actually XY chromosome. And so in the presence of the Y chromosome, there's actually a region in the Y chromosome called the sex determining region of the Y chromosome. That's actually what SRY stands for. So in the presence of the SRY chromosome, what happens is there is actually the secretion, in this case, of small, very, very small amounts of testosterone, okay? And in the presence of this amount of testosterone, what happens is that the Wolffian duct degenerates, and thereby the only duct that actually develops is the Wolffian duct, which makes this male at birth, okay? On the other hand, if you don't have the Y chromosome, what happens is the Wolffian duct degenerates and the Mullerian duct eventually develops and differentiates into, in this case, the female genitalia. Okay, so this in this case is the female. So hypothetically speaking, we are all by default females. The only thing that makes us male is, again, the sex determining region of the Y chromosome. There's actually problems in which actually cases in which actually females, XX chromosomes, are exposed to testosterone in the womb, and what happens is because of this very small exposure to exogenous testosterone at a very young, at a very young developmental stage, they actually get born as, in this case, impotent females, okay? So in this case, the reason why they're impotent or sterile, actually impotent is for males, we call sterile for females when they cannot give birth, is because of the, again, the degeneration of most of the Mullerian duct, okay, during the introduction of exogenous testosterone. But again, testosterone, sex determining region, sex determining region of the Y chromosome determines whether someone gets born as a male or not, okay? So that is a very important thing. So Y chromosome determines male or female, right? So based on that, so because we are born, in this case, from 2 different types of ducts, those 2 ducts are what we call homologous structures. So in development, in utero, all of those ducts actually have, in this case, similar homologous, okay, homo meaning same, structures. So they develop from the same or adjacent structures, so they develop also similar, or in most cases, the same function in both males and females. So if you look at the homologous organs here, obviously what's not shown here is the testes and the ovaries, okay? The testes is obviously the primary sexual organ for males, and the ovaries are the primary sexual organs for females. So we're just looking at the vestigial, in this case secondary, or in this case genitalia, all right? And what happens is, if you look at this one, there's actually 3 main functions that's actually shown here. It's either secretion, okay, protection, or pleasure. And when I say pleasure, it's actually not really pleasure, okay? It's actually copulatory organs, okay? It actually helps you, okay, copulatory or pleasure organs. And the pleasure organs, or the copulatory organs in this case, the primary function of that is in order for someone to reach orgasm or climax. And for males, the reason for, in this case, pleasure or climax or orgasm is the delivery of sperm. okay? And in females, obviously in this case, that actually serves mostly in this case, I guess, doesn't really serve a physiological function, okay, these copulatory organs, except for pleasure. So if you look at this one, the exposed portion of the penis, the glans penis, the head of the penis, is homologous to the exposed portion of the clitoris, also called the glans clitoris. Interestingly speaking, the glans penis is protected by the foreskin called the prepuce, and the glans clitoris is actually, in this case, protected by the clitoral prepuce, which is called the hood, right? So again, in uncircumcised males, the actual head of the penis is actually covered by foreskin, right? And obviously females, so you actually have the clitoris is actually, in this case, hidden by the prepuce, okay? So those two things are, again, protective in nature. So the foreskin protects the head of the penis because the head of the penis is quiet, very, very sensitive. And the prepuce for the clitoris actually protects the glans clitoris because, again, similarly to the glans penis, in fact, more so than the glans penis, the clitoris actually has a lot of sensitive nerve endings, okay, in the head. Now, the penis, when it gets stimulated, okay, during, arousal, actually enlarges in this case. And there's actually two primary tubes that actually gets filled with blood, and those called the corpus spongiosum and the corpora cavernosa. And if you look at it from the anterior and from the front end, what actually happens, ladies and gentlemen, is if you look at this one, corpora cavernosa, you actually have three tubes. You actually have two corpora cavernosa, and then on the bottom you actually have one corpus spongiosum, and that's actually where the urethral opening is, okay? So this tree, okay, is the actual, in this case, the blood, okay, like actually they take up blood during, in this case, during arousal, and they engorge or they enlarge, okay? Now, similarly speaking, the clitoris, okay, just like here, actually enlarges during sexual arousal. And interestingly speaking, if you look at this one, vestibular bulbs, okay, and the corpus spongiosum is actually related. And the reason why this is interestingly speaking, and what's not shown here, is the actual vestibular bulb actually are two masses that surrounds the opening to the vagina. Actually, what happens is the clitoris actually looks like this. You actually have the glans there. You actually have the crus of the, and then what happens is you have the vagina here, and on either side of the vagina you actually have vestibular bulbs, and those vestibular bulbs enlarges also as well during arousal. So just like males, the vestibular bulb, okay, the corpus cavernosum of the clitoris, plus obviously similar to the male, actually gets engorged or enlarges during sexual arousal, okay? So that's and again, that's for copulatory or pleasure organ in this case, right? So the scrotum, okay, obviously protects the testes, while the labia majora actually protects, in this case, the urogenital opening as well. So they have a protective mechanism in this case. And then, interestingly speaking, we actually have the prostate gland, which actually, the prostate gland actually, in this case, contributes 30% to, in this case, ejaculatory fluid, okay? And if you look at it in the females, you actually have Skene's gland. Skene's gland has been hypothesized to actually, in this case, create secretions as well, similar to ejaculatory secretions from males. In fact, some females, they believe that they actually urinate during intercourse. That actually is not urine. That's what that actually is actually secretions from the Skene's gland. Okay, so again, the reason for that one again is for secretion. For males, the reason why the prostate gland is so important is the 30% of, even though it only makes up 30% of secretion, 70% of ejaculatory secretion from males are actually from the seminal vesicles. This 30% is actually very, very high in pH. It's actually a basic. And the reason why that is the female vaginal canal is actually very, very low in pH. Okay, it's slightly acidic. So the reason why you need to have a high pH in the prostate gland is because semen, okay, actually not semen, but sperm likes an environment that actually has slightly high in pH and actually hates environment that is very, very low in pH. So the prostate gland actually helps sperm, in this case, live longer in the environment of the vagina as they try to migrate up to the uterus and actually meet with, in this case, an egg, hopefully. All right. So those are homologous structures. Homologous structures means they develop from the same structures from birth. Okay, actually way before birth, and they actually have similar functions as well. And again, the three main functions again is, if you just want to narrow it down, is secretion, obviously protective function, and obviously a copulatory or a pleasure function. And again, for males, the copulatory, the pleasure function is to deliver, is to actually ejaculate the semen, whereas for females, that is mostly not really, this just primarily for pleasure. Okay, very important in this case. So when we are born, we are not, obviously we cannot have kids when we're like 6-year-olds. Okay, yeah, like I don't know if that is changing anytime soon, because that has been getting, the age of puberty has been getting lower and lower. But at one point the age of puberty is around, you know, obviously the age teens, right? 15, 16, 17 years old. But lately, because of in this case, because of improvements in nutrition, we actually have females now who actually hit puberty at the age of 11. So quite, you know, like, so these are just the trends that's happening in the world. But puberty, when you hit puberty, that means to say that you are now capable to have children. That means to say, before puberty, you do not have viable eggs and you do not have viable sperm. Very important. Okay? Once you hit puberty, now you start secreting eggs and sperm, which means to say now that you are capable of having children. So that's actually the technical term for puberty. Okay, some people actually attach puberty to a more psychological development, but in this case, for our class, we will just in this case designate the ability to create eggs and sperm, like in this case, viable eggs and sperm at the age of puberty. For females, puberty is actually marked, okay, by the first, in this case, the first menstrual cycle. So once you start, in this case, getting your period, that means you've hit puberty. So in males, actually, this is actually triggered. Normally, we don't really know this. This is sometimes triggered by your first wet dream. You actually ejaculate while you're sleeping, and that normally indicates that you are, in this case, you're actually ejaculating sperm, which means to say that you are now capable of having children. Now, the timing of puberty is dependent upon many factors. But if you remember back to your hormone system, you actually have your hypothalamus, obviously, and then you have your pituitary gland, and obviously you have your testes or the ovaries. Okay, so if you remember that, and you guys remember that what comes out of the actual hypothalamus is gonadotropin releasing hormone, and then from the anterior pituitary you actually have LH and FSH. Okay, and then obviously that then stimulates the creation of androgens, and in this case, if we talk about androgens, we're talking about testosterone or estrogen. Initially speaking, what happens is the secretions of gonadotropin releasing hormone is actually quite low. Okay, in fact, low to non-existent before puberty. Once you hit puberty, what happens is now, okay, the hypothalamus now, in this case, secretes gonadotropin releasing hormone and starts this whole cascade, and that induces obviously the creation of viable eggs and sperm, along with the development of secondary sexual characteristics. And when we talk about secondary sexual characteristics, we're talking about breast enlargement, pubic hair growth, okay, the stinky sweat, okay, so all of the stuff, the lowering of voices for males, okay, so, and again, that is actually what's secondary or external sex characteristics becoming more prominent. Now, one of the things that's genetics obviously is very important, but we now know for a fact that environmental factors, which is obviously tied to health of the individual, is actually a big component. And one of new research that actually suggests that this is dependent upon the amount of fat, adipose tissue that you actually deposit, right? I don't know if you guys know this. So if you are an athlete when you were in high school and you actually are very skinny and you don't have a lot of fat, a lot of those athletes actually have, in this case, quite weird periods, okay, irregular periods. Whereas if you actually have a little bit more of a, in this case, adipose tissue, subcutaneous fat, you actually, there's actually much more likelihood, obviously, higher fat, breast enlargement, okay, all of those things is again, so this is actually somewhat tied, if you want to think about it, to some of the problems that we're having right now, which is about obesity and all of those other things.